as an executive, maybe you have been invited to attend an event. Perhaps you've been offered a promotion or someone has discussed a promotion with you and you really want to know, how can I step into this role and speak in a way that reflects someone of an executive stature or having an executive thought process? Well, in this video, I'm going to share with you a couple secrets that oftentimes may not be touched upon or discussed as it relates to how you can learn how to speak like an executive. Now, there's a couple of reasons why you want to speak like an executive. Number one, you want to make sure that you are positioning yourself as the leading authority or as the person, the individual, the woman in leadership that is at a place where you are able to handle yourself under pressure. Now, before I go into more detail on this, let me give you the two secrets I'm going to share with you today. Go into a bit more detail on those so you have something to work with. By the end of this video, you will understand why these two secrets are really truly the biggest secrets as it relates to speaking like an executive. The first secret is to be direct. The second secret is to be concise. Now, as I mentioned, these are just two secrets. There's a lot more secrets I have to share with you. If you only subscribe to this channel, you will learn a lot of information here. My name is Dr. Jacinta, and I focus heavily on advanced communication skills and strategies. If you are wanting to learn how to communicate and speak more confidently and concisely under pressure, this is the absolute best channel for you on YouTube. I have over 1,000 videos. Yes, over 1,000 videos here that will help you to be able to communicate at a higher level than your peers. If you happen to be a woman in leadership and this is something that you're struggling with to try to sound and speak like an executive, you absolutely need to reach out to me for my high stakes communication intensive. It will completely change your life at exciteexcellence.org. Now, as I mentioned, the two secrets I'm sharing with you are being direct and being concise. If you think about leaders, think about some executive leaders that you perhaps have been in contact with recently. What are some things? What are some, when you think of the word executive, what are some of the first words that come to your mind? Let me know in the comments below. What are you thinking when you hear executive or hear someone speak like an executive? What comes up for you? Before I go into this more, I want to say hello to those of you joining the live today. Let me know what part of the big, beautiful world you are joining from today. And when you hear the word speak like an executive, what comes to mind for you? What are some words? What are some thoughts that you have as it relates to this topic? Put it in the comments below. Let's have a conversation today. Now, I mentioned that there's really two main secrets to share with you as it relates to being able to speak like an executive, and that is being direct and being concise. I'm going to go into those in a bit more detail, but let me say hello to those in the chat. I want to say hello to Sharita Jahai. Hello. It says, I believe I said your name. If I didn't say it correctly, I'm so sorry, friend. Says hello from India. Hello, welcome. How you doing today? And someone else, I don't know the actual language that is in, but hello and welcome. Now, as I mentioned, when you think of leaders and you think of executives, the most basic way they communicate is in a very direct way. So let me explain this to you. When you are communicating with someone, you're speaking to someone, how can you be direct? Let me know in the comments below. When you think of the word direct, what actually comes up for you? Let me know in the comments below. Now, when I mean direct specifically, direct in terms of speaking like an executive typically will reflect in the following way. This individual is not at the point where they are trying to go around the bush. They're trying to ask you a question and perhaps waste time asking a question? No. Typically, when an executive is speaking, the question is very direct, meaning that if there is something they need to know the answer to, they will just ask you that question. The reason why a lot of people struggle with sounding like an executive is because we may have questions that we need to ask someone that might be a bit more challenging or a bit more contentious, that we feel as if, oh, I don't want to hurt this person's feelings. And we start to hesitate. We kind of go around the bush about it. We don't ask directly, but we try to ask. Typically, executives do not do that. And if you want to sound like an executive, the next time you're in a conversation speaking to someone and you have a question that have the least inclination that might be a bit more challenging, it may be more of a tough question to ask, it is going to be best for you to simply ask the question. Now, your tone of voice, the way you say it, and all of that plays a big factor into your directness. There's a ton of videos on my channel that talk about that. You're welcome to subscribe to learn how to modify your tone of voice. But ultimately, you have to just ask the question. They're very direct. Executives are very direct. I've been a C suite executive for a very long time. We are very direct in terms of how we communicate. We think more in an analytical way. What's the problem? What's the solution? What's the problem? What's the solution? Now, before I go into my second secret for you, which is being concise, let me go into the chat. So I want to say, okay, I'm going to try to say your name. I'm going to say Shariti. I hope I'm saying it right, but said it's okay. F3TCHYY says direct equals simple. Absolutely. That's a really great insight that you mentioned. It is very simple. The conversation you have as an executive is something that you want to make sure that you are asking the questions directly. You are being the most efficient that you can be in terms of how you're communicating. If you have a conversation with someone and you find yourself over explaining or talking too much, a lot of the times you are not being direct. And this is what will prevent you from sounding like an executive. It will prevent you from being able to get clients in your business. It will prevent you from being able to negotiate another salary. It will prevent you from being able to receive a promotion or transition to a different role. Communicating and speaking like an executive and using my secret I shared with you as in terms of being direct will help you. All right, let me go back to the chat. Shariti, I hope I'm saying it right, friend, says talk formally. Yes. So when people, and I thank you for mentioning that, and those are words for those of you who just joined, I asked the question, when you think of an executive speaking in a direct way, what comes up for you specifically? What comes up for you? And so the words that we have were that direct equals simple. The second is that direct means, or an executive speaking means talking formally. Talking formally means that you are able to pause when you need to. You're able to slow down when you need to communicate. You are able to master some of the skills that I talk about here on my channel in terms of your tone of voice, managing your emotions under pressure, eye contact, facial expressions, silence, all of that comes together. But I wanted to just share these two secrets with you today. Let me go back into the chat and then we'll ultimately talk about how being concise is a bit different than being direct. Direct is more, this is what you want to. We have a problem. This is a question I have. It's not going around the bush trying to not ask a question just because you're afraid of the answer. Okay, so let's see. Sharita, I'm gonna say, hopefully I said it says right. Let's see. All right, F3TCHYY says you can just say fetch. Okay, fantastic, fetch. I appreciate that. Now that I see your name and how you wrote it, now I can get why you said fetch. So good to see you. Thank you for clarifying that. Shariti says, yes, can go with my name. It's a little traditional. That's okay. It's no problem at all. All right, so we talked about being direct. So being direct, as Fetch mentioned, is being simple. Sharuti, I hope I'm saying it correctly, says talk formally. Now let's go into being concise, because concise is a really big part of this also. Being concise means you have the ability to say what it is you need to say in a way that doesn't cause you to have to mention extra things. For example, a challenge I see a lot of my clients struggle with, and I would say not only my clients, but a lot of people struggle with, is when they're trying to be concise in terms of communicating. They're trying to explain something, but what happens? Let me know if this has ever happened to you before. You try to explain something, and then there's an idea that just pops in your mind. And then maybe it's a story, maybe it's an experience that you had before, and you find yourself trying to talk about it, but you mentioned the story that was in your mind, and then you completely say, "Oh, I forgot what I was saying. I lost my train of thought." Have any of you ever been in that situation? It happens. And if you have lost your train of thought, a lot of times it comes down to not being concise because you are not being able to condense everything you need to say into the only most important things you need to say, which is why conciseness is a true secret to how executives speak. Now, let me go back to the chat. Fetch says, I'm new here. What's your main goal? Okay, Fetch. Well, I welcome, glad that you're here. My channel heavily focuses in on advanced communication skills and strategies that will help you to communicate more confidently and concisely under pressure. If you've ever struggled with thinking on your feet when you're speaking in the hot seat, or maybe you've been in a situation where you needed to read people and you just simply didn't know how to do it, maybe you've been in a conversation that turned into a more contentious, more challenging conversation out of nowhere. Maybe you've been in a situation where you've been caught off guard and you simply just didn't know what to say, and you did the most famous thing that people do. You froze. You just froze. Mine went blank. You didn't know what to say. That is what this channel heavily focuses in on to help you avoid being in those situations. The skills I share with you, Fetch, I have learned these for the past 20 years as a C-suite executive, as a director, a public speaker. I've been on the news, I've been in magazines, and I've interacted with congressional leaders here. And I've been in those very friendly and very contentious conversations. And a lot of times, leaders, they know how to communicate. I heavily focus on leaders. My target audience in terms of my services are women in leadership. But many leaders know how to communicate. But, Fetch, when the conversation goes under pressure, as I say, when there's a challenge, there's someone that doesn't like something, or someone trying to bait with you or become argumentative, people shut down and they don't know what to say. And that's why my channel focuses in on those very high stakes, high pressure situations. Hope that gave you some insight there, Fetch. Fetch says, "What about using metaphors in a sentence, such as saying your skills say lights out instead of using your skills are bad or something like that?" Now, if you're trying to communicate as an executive, okay, there's a lot of executives that communicate in different ways. And Fetch, you have to find what makes Fetch feel like an executive. So that's number one. If you have a situation, you can use metaphors. It just depends on what type of metaphor you use and who you're talking to. Sometimes you will find those people, and we all interact with these people, okay? You will find people that are they're just very highly emotional about things. And that's okay. Some people, if you told them Fetch lights out, they would I would laugh, but some people would just go somewhere and cry. They would. Thinking about what is the metaphor that you're trying to say, and make sure it is something that is as polite and as polished that it is, that would not offend anyone, is probably the best way to go. If you happen to say lights out, someone may say, "Oh gosh, that makes me cry," and they would go somewhere and cry. So let's say if someone's doing a bad job, okay, I talk about this a lot, Fitch. If someone is doing a bad job, as you mentioned, perhaps not saying they're doing a bad job is probably the best thing, because literally the moment, Fitch, you say you're doing a bad job, e- everything else you say is going nowhere. They heard I'm doing a bad job. It comes out, they hear it, and they shut down. Anything else you say that may be constructive or productive, they're not trying to hear you say that. So, for example, you may want to say, by the way, I appreciate what you've been doing, because they have been doing something, even if it is a bad job. They did something. I hope so. But you may want to say, I appreciate what you're doing right now. I really enjoy working with you and some of the projects that you're working on. Tell me a bit about how things are going for you. And then let them talk, let them give you some insight and go from there. I'll go into that more. Rowan expert. Hello, Tom. Good to see you, friend. Tom says, good evening. Good to see you, Tom. Now, as I mentioned, having these are more difficult conversations. So if you're telling someone they're doing something bad, try to be as empathetic in terms of what they're going through as possible. Sometimes someone may just not be doing something right, but the way you deliver that information is really important. So using metaphors is good, but just make sure the metaphor is very professional, I would say, or something easily relatable. So instead of saying lights out or you're doing a bad job, I would probably say, you've been doing some really great things. These are the things that you've been doing very well. These are a couple opportunities that we have to improve. I have found that sometimes if you ask the person, how are things going? What's going on with you in this role? Are things working out for you? Are there any areas you may need some help with? Sometimes, majority of the times, a person will tell you what the problem is that you were going to talk to them about, anyways, if they're being honest with themselves. Now, you will find people that are not being honest with themselves and they would just completely say, oh, everything's great, everything's good, when you know everything is bad. And for those individuals, I would mention to them specifically, this is something that I do want to talk to you about. There's a couple places where I believe that we can improve and enhance your performance to help you in whatever they plan on doing with their career, to try to bring it in a more, I would say, tangible, professional, constructive way. We've all had conversations, and let me know in the comments below if you've had a conversation with someone. Maybe you've done something wrong. I've done something wrong plenty of times in my career. But maybe you've had a conversation with someone and they said something to you that was just rude. Let me give you an example. Let me give you an example what happened to me personally when I did something incorrectly. Now, I did something incorrectly, apparently, and I didn't know I was doing it incorrectly. And what happened to me specifically was that the conversation, and I talk about this a lot on my channel, the conversation happened at the worst time of the day. I tell you all, conversations at the end of the day that are going to be difficult, that are going to be hard, they're just tough. They're just really, really hard to do. What happened to me specifically is that I was doing something incorrectly, apparently, and I wasn't doing what I needed to do. The person brought me in at the very end of the day, and I actually had a flight to catch because one of my best friends at the time was getting married. Brought me in and said, hey, I got to talk to you about this. And I said, okay, well, I don't really have time to talk to you about this right now. I have a flight I got to catch. And the manager at the time said, no, I really have to talk to you about this. So I thought, okay, well, I'll give you about 1 or 2 minutes to tell me what you got to do. And the person just went off. It wasn't even, it wasn't even nice. There was no pleasantries. There was no way of them trying to make this sound like an executive. They just came across as just being rude. You're doing this wrong. You're doing that wrong. We're going to move this and that. And of course, for me, if someone comes at you and says you're doing this wrong and that wrong, I would hope that you're not going to just take that. I mean, there may be something that you're in doing incorrectly, but you should always have some data and some statistics in your mind about what you're doing correctly. And I did. And so we talked and had a discussion back and forth. But ultimately, because I was a bit younger, I let the conversation go on too long, and guess what happened? I missed my friend's wedding. I missed my best friend's wedding, and it was in California, and I missed the flight because I literally was talking back and forth to this manager. Why do I say that? Because there's going to be situations that happen where we've all been in those situations, and sometimes as leaders, as we're transitioning in our roles and etc., we forget. Okay, leaders forget that they have been in challenging situations too. And so they'll have those conversations with individuals, and instead of speaking to them from empathy and being direct and being concise like an executive, they may come at the conversation or approach the conversation in a way that is very aggressive, very much finger pointing type of thing. And that's not the way you want to communicate. Okay. Excuse me. Fetch said it would be better if they just stopped you at the moment to show you the correct, instead of saying, yo, we need to talk when you're busy. Yes, and a lot of times, and Mohammed Falahi 709, hello, welcome, welcome. A lot of times, Fetch, that is correct. But this is the thing. When you are going to have a difficult conversation and you want to present yourself like an executive, it is so critically important to read the room. You have to read the room and read the person you're speaking to. So you make a really good point, Fetch, and I appreciate you bringing that up, because for me, I already set the expectation. Even if it's something you need to talk to me about, to this person specifically, I already said, I have a flight I have to catch. When someone says they have a flight I have to catch, that's not the time to have that conversation. It is a conversation that could happen later, but what the reason why they had that conversation is they had already planned that discussion. They felt like they had to have it that day. But at that point, what I was thinking or what I was going through really they didn't really care anything about, obviously, which is why we ended up having that conversation. A lot of leaders do this. They come in with this preconceived notion that this is the conversation I got to have this conversation today. Like I have to talk to this person today. We have to talk at the end of the day. I don't care if this person is having a life threatening emergency. We have to talk. Literally, some leaders will come into a conversation with that very closed mindset of, I have to talk to you today. It has to be right now. But if you take a moment and you read the room and you look at your employee, your teammate, your business associate, etc., get a feel from them to see, is this the right time? It may not be the right time, and it very well could be something that could be addressed at a later date. Now, if you have, let's say, a termination you're doing or something along those lines, then I understand that there may not be the best time for you to say it, but you may have to have that conversation that day. But still, you still want to be mindful of what the person is going through, what's going on with that individual, and think about, okay, if I was in that situation, if I was taking a flight, would I want to interrupt this person's conversation or interrupt their travel plans for what I have to say right this second? And if the leader that I communicated with would have thought in that way, they would have probably said, "No, I'll probably just let her go." I still to this day, this is one of my best, closest friends that I have. It still aches me to this day that I did not miss her wedding and that I did miss her wedding. And it really, I found out for me personally, it really impacted me in multiple ways as an individual because one, I was in a setting where I was working as a W-2. Two, when you're a W-2, people think they own you and they own your time and etc. And three, I missed out on a huge milestone of a dear friend of mine from dental school. And I didn't like it. And it put me in a very not happy state. And I will tell you that 99% of the time I am in a fantastic, fantastic mood. But that put me into the 1% where I was just like thinking to myself, this is horrible. This is catastrophic. I can't even believe this happened. Speaking like an executive will help you to avoid situations like that. Chaz, man of culture. Welcome back, Chaz. Good to see you, friend. Chaz says, hello, good to have you back. Yes, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I did take a bit of time off for the holiday and I had a lot of things happening business wise, a lot of calls, and it just took a lot of my time away, but I'm back. The schedule is going to be a little bit different, but I'm still back here and I'll be going live at least 7 to 8 times a week. Millie Arans, good to see you, Millie. How you doing today, friend? Millie says, "Hey, haven't been on your live in so long. I know it's been a while. It's good to see Tom and Ches and Millie come back and see some new individuals too, such as Fetch and Sharuti. So welcome everybody. And yes, it's been a while. Let me know what topics y'all want to learn a bit more about. I am here to support you any way that I can on your journey. I really wanted to talk about executive speaking today in terms of how you communicate like an executive, how do you speak like an executive? Because I had so many conversations just within my business this past week where I found that a lot of the individuals I spoke with really struggle with speaking like an executive, and it is preventing them from being able to complete projects, generate more income for their businesses, or generate more income for the roles that they're in. And it can be really hard if you don't understand those two secrets I shared with you, which are being direct, that will help you to speak like an executive, and to be concise in terms of how you're speaking. Now, you may think, well, I know there's a lot more to it. And guess what? There is. But these are the two most important skill sets that I have seen as presenting themselves as patterns that reflect the way executives speak. They're always very direct and they're always very concise for the most part. As I mentioned, there's executives that may not be as direct or concise as you'd like for them to, but for the most part, most of them are very direct. Now, let me know in the comments below when you have experienced an executive that has been direct and concise, and maybe a scenario where you have interacted with an executive that was not. either one. I've been in both scenarios, and I would absolutely love to hear what you all have experienced when you have interacted with different leaders and different executives over the years. Now, I will say that there's a couple things that I am working on, and I'm going to go into that in just a second. Let me see what's in the chat. Fitz says, "What about mobbings? How do you deal with them? Mobbings in terms of a violent crime? I'm thinking that's what you're referring to. That's a little bit out. I'm assuming, Fitch. I'm assuming, Fitch, that's what you're talking about. You've clarified for me and let me know if it's a little bit different. But typically, if I hear mobbings, that is a violent crime. And of course, that is completely different. That's a bit out of the scope of this channel specifically, but I would consider that a very high stakes situation. And it's just hard. I mean, it's one of those situations where it is very difficult for you to know what to do besides to just keep yourself safe. And most of the time when things like that happen, unfortunately, people are put in a situation where they may have objects positioned on them, potentially some weapon that is placed in front of them to say, okay, you better give me your money and etc. And all people can really do is give it to keep themselves safe. So I don't know if that's what you're referring to, but that's would be my insight on that. It's a little hard to manage that. I mean, because you're in the moment. Like, do you want to value your life? Because there's people out there that could care less if you live or not. There are people that are unfortunately that are like that. And even if you try to say, no, 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 I don't want to do anything, they'll just hurt you and not think twice about it. There are people out there like that are like that. Okay, Fetch says, I'm not sure if it's written in English, but mobbing is like psychologically affecting a worker to make them quit their job. Oh, okay. So it's a different okay, so what you're trying to say is probably a little bit different. So for me on the English, for me as a native English speaker, when I hear mobbing, for us, mob, when you think of a group of people coming at you that are causing some type of violent crime, more than likely that's what's kind of translated to us here. But for what you're saying, to make a worker psychologically quit their job, to me, that is more of manipulation in terms of you having someone that is trying to cause you problems to make you do something else. Now, when I talk about manipulation, I've talked about that on one of my videos, I would say within the past month on my channel, where we talked about manipulation, went into a lot of detail on it. And usually when those situations happen, you have to recognize it. That's the key. Reading the room is one of the most important skills that anyone that is a leader needs to master. And if you think for just a second that there's no way you can read a room, you can't read people's mind, of course, there's certain depths of people's minds you simply cannot read. I'm not a mind reader by no means, but I'm a very highly observant person, and you can start to pick up on those situations. So, Fetch specifically, let's go into detail. If you're in a situation where, and I've been in this situation before, where you notice people start to undermine you, meaning specifically here that they are questioning your decisions or they think what you're doing is not right, and they start to give you a hard time about aspects of your job that they never gave you a hard time about. Those are ways where someone is trying to undermine you, manipulate the situation to make you feel like, oh, by the way, you're doing a bad job. You don't need to be here, but they're not going to fire you. And I find that happens a lot in different organizations, different businesses, especially when you're dealing with individuals that maybe going through some kind of stress financially and they are struggling in their departments or their businesses and they don't know how to conduct themselves like an executive or speak like an executive. I've also seen this happen to individuals that are working with superstars. So for instance, when you have someone that is a very high performer, let's say they're up here, and let's say their boss or supervisor manager is right here and they see that, they start to become jealous and they start to give the person a hard time. When those situations happen, you just have to be very highly observant of what's being said and what's being not said. And you have to determine, is this worth you staying at? Is this situation worth you staying in? Or is this something where you need to plan your exit? And I've just found it in so many different types of ways where sometimes it's worth it, sometimes it's not. Most of the time, when I have been faced with that situation over the past 20 years, I've been in these executive and higher level leadership roles. When I start to pick up on things that are like that, as you mentioned, in terms of that manipulation, trying to say things and undermine you, I start planning my exit. It may not happen immediately. Okay. It's not something where I'm going to say, you know what, by the way, I quit tomorrow. But it's something for me that I actually start planning in my head and say, okay, I'm noticing this, I'm observing this, I'm reading the room and I'm picking up on this. What can I do that is within my control to help to protect me in this situation? And that's what I would do if you find yourself in a situation where someone is psychologically trying to cause you to quit. You just have to determine, is it worth me staying? And if it's worth you staying, then having a conversation with your human resources department may be a appropriate way, depending on your human resources department, because I will tell you candidly, some human resources department are definitely not for you. Now, I know there's people that are in human resources that would say, no, 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 don't say that. That's not right. No, I'm telling you from experience. I've been in those situations and I've been on the other side of it. And I've seen how some human resources departments are very helpful and some of them are just as biased as everybody else. And it's just not simply worth your time. Fetch says, OMG, I didn't mean that. My bad. That's okay, Fetch. That's okay. That's why we clarified it so we know the difference between the two. Now I know exactly what you're saying. So I appreciate you so much for clarifying that. When I hear mobbings, that's what I think. Because a mob for us here that speak for some of us that speak English language fluently, mob is a large group of people, and so typically when there's a large group of people, that means there may not be the best situations going on. Now, there's a couple things I'm working on, and if y'all have any other questions, and that's a very good question, by the way. So let me know if y'all have any more. There is a ebook that I'm writing. It is a communicating under pressure ebook. I've talked about doing this for a couple of months now. I'm actually done with it. That was a bit of the break I had this past week was to finish the ebook. So the ebook is done. I actually have a bonus assessment for high stakes communication included in the ebook as well. That will be there also. And right now, I'm just working on getting the logistics together for it in terms of landing pages and etc. And as soon as it's available, I will absolutely send it over to you all. The assessment itself is basically a high stakes communication assessment. There's a couple scenarios that I have there that are listed that will give you some insight in terms of how are you communicating under pressure as a woman in leadership. If you are a man in leadership and you take it, there's one question specifically that relates to women. You just skip that. It still will give you a pretty good insight in terms of how you are communicating as a leader. So I wanted to let you all know that I do have that done. I do have that ready, and it will be coming out hopefully within the next month. As I mentioned, I'm just working on the logistics of the rollout for it and making sure that everybody has access to that. There are 2 books I'm writing this year. One is on executive presence that will be the only executive presence book you will need to read, and then another book is going to be on more advanced communication. So I'll let you know as soon as I have those books self-published, but I do anticipate publishing both of those books this year. Let me know how I can support you. I know it's been a while, so if there's anything that's came up for you since the last time I was live, which is about a week and a half ago, a lot has changed since then for me. Let me know. Let's talk about it. Let's plan some conversations out. There's several topics that Cat 23rd mentioned previously, so I'm going to pick up on some of those. But if there's anything else that you all want to discuss and talk about, let me know in the comments below on any of my videos. You're welcome to just send me a note, send me a comment. Maybe something resonated with you during a video and you would like to learn more about it. I'm here to help you any way that I can. I want you all to be very successful and communicate in a very exceptional way as leaders. And truly, the only way for you to do that is if you can start learning how to master yourself in terms of how you communicate under pressure. Now, for those of you new to me, I go live on YouTube at least 7 times a week. My schedule has fluctuated a bit. So I had some changes happen to my schedule about a week and a half ago. Therefore, the days that I go live will be a little bit different than normal. I'm going to release that new schedule here very soon, just as soon as I get a couple things figured out. I will be live tomorrow evening for sure. Tomorrow morning, I am going to try. In the mornings, I'm probably going to have much shorter lives. So just bear with me. They will be very quick, high impact lives. They may last 10 minutes max. But in the evening time, I have a lot more time to spend with you. So I'm glad that you all are here. Let me know how I can help you. Okay, we have Ed Brook. Hello, Ed. Of course, Ed Brook says, "Do you remember me?" Yes, Ed, I remember you, and welcome back, friend. So good to see you here. Glad that you are here today. So I appreciate you all being here. Let me know what questions you have. What are some challenging situations you're dealing with? What are some really challenging situations that you have? Maybe some difficult conversations coming up, or what are you just dealing with right now as a leader? Put in the comments below. Let's talk about it. Chaz Man of Culture says it's usually late here when you go live. What I will do, I'll be live in the morning time. I'm on the Eastern Standard Time zone here in the United States. And hopefully, Chaz, that will capture your time zone where it will not be as late because right now I realize that it is very late at the moment. Fetch says it's 2 a.m. for me. Laugh out loud. Oh my goodness, Fetch, you should go to sleep. But I appreciate you so much for being here. Later this year, and I've talked about it several times. Tom knows about it also. I am going to do a event just for my YouTube audience, whether it be on Zoom or etc. I have to figure out how I'm going to work the logistics, but I'm going to be doing a couple of events at different time zones to hopefully catch my audience. It will likely be something via Zoom so that we can be off YouTube, so we can at least be able to interact and say hello with each other. But just keep that in mind. I know many of you are joining from different parts of the world, and I appreciate you all so very much for spending some time with me on any of my lives or watching any of my content here. I do want to make sure that I am able to capture you all. I hate for you to have to be up at 2 o'clock in the morning watching my content. So keep a look at my lives. Typically in the mornings, I'm going to adjust my time to where it will probably be around 7:30, 7:35 a.m. Eastern Standard Time is when I will probably go live. And so see what time that will coordinate for you. It shouldn't be, hopefully, it won't be as 2 o'clock in the morning as it is late right now, but hopefully it'll be a little bit earlier. Okay, so Ed Brooks says, do you still go to school? So no, I do not go to school anymore. Well, let me say that. Let me rephrase that, Ed. I do learn all the time. All the time I learn. And I genuinely believe that learning is a lifelong commitment to yourself. And even though I'm not in the academic setting, I am a doctor. I practice as a dentist. I've been doing that for a very, 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 very long time. I did my school. I did my school. When you go to school for being a doctor, you've been in school forever, literally forever. And I'm done with that part of it, but I'm always constantly learning. I'm constantly taking courses. I'm constantly reading books. Right now, I'm currently reading The 10X Rule by Grant Cardone. I'm reading that right now. I'm almost done with that. And then I have a couple books that I'm planning that I already have queued up to read within the next couple weeks. But this is something that is really important, especially when you're thinking about speaking like an executive, communicating like an executive, being that amazing leader. It's really important for you to understand that just because you go to school, you go to college and you learn and you say, "Oh, I'm done. I'm finished with college." That is really where your learning actually begins because most of the time when you go to college, they're just giving you the very fundamentals of what you need to know. It's not real time, real actually real world advice. That's why you have to learn as much as you can, watch YouTube, of course, subscribe to the channel if you like the content, and learn as much as you can. But always be learning. That's what I would say. Always be learning, even if you're reading books, learn as much as you can because there's a lot of information out there for us to learn. Ed Brooks says, I'm 25 years old. Fantastic. Well, depends on what you plan on doing with your life. 25 years old, I believe, is it's a very important time in life because you're at that age where you are learning and you have an idea of what you want to do with your life, but it may not be fully clear just yet. We've all been there. All of us have been there at some point in our lives. I've been way past 25 a long time ago, but I remember that time period for me, and I was actually in school. But if there's something that comes up for you on your journey as you're trying to navigate through life as a leader and really communicating at that higher level, then Ed, just let me know. I wish that I would have had someone speak to me about how to communicate when I was 25. When I was 25, I spent time in Toastmasters International, and Toastmasters helped me to become a better public speaker for my classmates because I was president of my dental school class for several years. However, I didn't truly learn how to communicate under pressure until I started in the workforce, when I started to be in those more senior level roles. And as much as I love Toastmasters so much because I've became a distinguished Toastmaster with them. Only 1% of their 358,000 members actually accomplished this award because it's very hard to do. But still, there's an aspect of it that just cannot meet the real time, high stakes demand that you have when your executive presence on the line, when someone's trying to give you a hard time. There's just some things that public speaking just can't teach you. You have to learn from your own lived experiences. And that's the reason why I come here to share my situations in high stakes, high pressure situations so that you don't make mistakes that I made and you always showcase yourself as someone that has got it together. Okay, I'm going to say, let's see. It's there's a different ways to say the name, but I'm going to give it a try. I'm gonna say Elsie Guyopio, possibly? If I said it incorrectly, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. But it says greetings from Spain, planning to, I guess to move to Ireland for work. Well, welcome. Hope you're doing well today and thank you for stopping by. Fetch says, what motto or philosophy do you think a person shall adapt in their life? Fetch, that's a really great question. And there's so many things. I think a lot of it is very individualized and very personal to the individual. One of the things I would say that people can consider is that when you think about your motto in your life and what you want to do and how you want to make an impact, I'll just share with you personally what my motto is, but your motto in terms of what you want to do is going to be deeply personal to you. And that's something that I can't give you an answer for. But I would say making the world a better place. And I know that sounds very, very cliche. Oh my goodness, everybody says it. But I believe that there's some truth to that. And I believe if you have the mindset of how can I make things better? What can I do to make things better? How can I improve people? How can I improve life? I believe it will always set you up for success regardless of what you end up doing in the world. Now, many people think of how can I make the world better? And they think of it in the very grand scheme of, oh, I have to run for a leadership office. I have to be a prime minister. I got to be a president. I got to be a VP. I got to be a dictator. I don't know. I mean, people think it's always on the grand scale, but I believe a lot of times, Fetch, people underestimate the changes you can make in generations just by interacting and helping someone. For example, on my YouTube channel, and on some of the other platforms I own. My mission here is to make the largest high stakes, high pressure communication content library on planet Earth. That's my mission. That's what I'm trying to do. I want to make the world a better place because I know that most leaders know how to communicate, whether they're a woman in leadership, in my direct audience, or they're a man in leadership. Everybody knows how to communicate. If you're a woman, man, doesn't matter. You communicate as a leader to a certain extent. But when the conversation becomes more challenging, that's why I see a lot of people struggle, whether they're women or whether they're men. They just struggle with that aspect of leadership. And if I can do anything to help you fish or to help anyone watching the channel where I can share with you something, maybe I can share with you my cowboy analogy that I use for eye contact. You should check that out. Or if I can share you a way to communicate when someone challenges you. You can use that information to tell to someone that you know, to tell to your friend. They may tell it to their friend. They may tell it to their children. They may teach it to their children's children. I think about it more in the terms of generation. Could I do something at a larger scale at some point in my life? Yeah, probably so. I probably will. But for the time being, I just feel like I would just personally, for me, that's my impact is to make the world a better place. I have a very, very big idea that I'm working on. I can't announce it yet because I'm just not at the point where I can just yet. But I do want to change and completely transform the way that people prepare to communicate under pressure. But that you have to hang around with me for a few years before I get that in development. Okay, so Chess Man of Culture says, what is the hardest part of being an executive leader? And how do you handle pressure of making important decisions? That's a great question, Chaz. In fact, I'll get to you in just a second. Chaz, there's a lot of part of being an executive leader that's hard. And if I can share with you some of the maybe more challenging situations that I have had to deal with, is to make the hard decisions that you don't want to make. So, for example, when COVID happened, we all experienced that in the whole entire world. I had to I had to let people go. And I did not want to do that because there was just so much going on. Organization, businesses, people just we couldn't make it. And so being an executive leader, while people may say this is what I want to aspire to, this is what I want to do, when you're in those situations and you have to make those very, very hard and difficult decisions that require you to end someone's livelihood or end a project that is a big project. It's those are hard decisions. Those are one of the harder decisions I would say that I've had to make. Anytime you're impacting someone's livelihood, it is a bother to me. I don't like doing that. I prefer not to do that, but these are decisions that you have to work through and you have to make. I, I would say most executives, you can look at anyone that has been in an executive role, if they've had to do any terms of layoffs, RIFs, which is reduction in force if you're not aware, or any terminations, it's not something that we like doing. There may be people out there that do. Let me not say that. There may be people out there that do like doing that, but for the most part, as an executive, these are conversations that we don't want to make. We don't like. That's probably the hardest one. And I know a couple of you all are here. I know Tom has been through some different challenging situations too. He may have some insight there. But that for me is always hard. It's always hard when you having to do layoffs or rifts or terminations. It's just I've been in situations where I've been on the other side of the conversation too. And when you go in from empathy, you know how people feel and you just don't you just want to help as much as you can. So that would probably be one of the hardest parts is when you're dealing with people and their livelihood or their lives if you're in a political role. That's always hard. It's hard. It's hard making decisions when you know that your team may struggle with something. Those are difficult decisions. So I hope they give you some insight there. It's typically hard decisions have to deal with people and the changes that you have to make or the very hard decisions that you have to make that are going to impact other people. That's why as an executive leader, it's so important for you to really to take time to think through as many best case, as many worst case scenarios as you can, and to do whatever it is you can to avoid that thing or avoid this from happening. I've been in those situations and I literally will move people to different locations to avoid people from not being terminated or laid off. Like I do what the most I can do to prevent that from happening. But if you have to make the decisions, you have to make it and you have to live with it. And that is sometimes can be very challenging. And how do you handle the pressure of making very important decisions? You start to, I want to say, you start to become accustomed to it. It's almost as if you have to build your stamina. And that's something that is hard for you to do unless you've been in those situations. A lot of the content I share with you here will help to get you there and get you used to being under pressure. But a lot of times, Chaz, it comes down to you have to build that stamina. You have to have hard situations come at you to the point where you can navigate them quickly. If someone gave me a hard situation, which I've dealt with a lot of hard situations this past year and a half, one day I'm going to talk to you all about it as soon as I get things worked out. But you would be surprised what I've dealt with this past year. But as an executive leader, when you are in those situations, you develop your own decision making algorithm to handle that pressure. I've talked about this a little bit, but Chaz, I'll give you an example. For me, when I have a hard decision that's coming to me that is a pressure decision, how do I make that decision? The first thing that I think of is I need data. I need data. I need information. Sometimes you may have someone come at you and say, "Oh my God, the sky is falling. The sky is falling. There's all kinds of crazy stuff going on." And you have to say, "Hold on just a second. What's going on?" And the more data that you are able to gather, the better you will be able to make a decision. Now, sometimes you may have a situation, Chaz, where you're getting data and it may not be entirely accurate because it's a freely fluid situation where things are just changing so fast. You don't know, maybe what you said is accurate, but 5 minutes later it's completely different. That happens a lot, especially in leadership roles, executive roles, public officials, and etc. But you have to speak on the information that you do know. So being able to get as much actual factual data as possible is one of the fastest ways for you to make decisions. If you rely on someone's emotional deposition and how they feel and all of this, that will cause you to just go down a rabbit hole you don't want to go down. So make sure you get as much data as you can, because you can't make those high pressure situations or high pressure decisions if you can't make a decision off of the accurate information. That's probably the one most important thing I would say. That's what I do. Whenever there's a fire that's happening, something catastrophic, I say, okay, who is it that I can trust to give me the information that I need so that I can make a decision? If it's somebody I know that came to me that's highly emotional, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to listen to them, but I'm going to say, okay, let me talk to so and so, because so and so is probably a bit more level-headed, and that's where I need to get information. So making that decision first, getting your data is very, very important. And realizing that once you get your data, Chaz, it comes down to your decision-making algorithm or your decision-making process. You have to say, what is the best option, what is the best case scenario that this situation will present itself as? What is the worst case scenario? And I would always plan for the worst case scenario first, because sometimes your worst case scenario may very well be what it is. But the next part of that is planning that best case scenario. If it's best case scenario, then this is the situation. But if it's worst case scenario, this is what you have to do. I'll give you an example. When COVID happened many years ago, I had to make those hard decisions where I didn't know exactly what it was. Everything was changing so fast. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't exactly sure what to do. I had to get data and find out, okay, how many gloves and masks do I have? And then how many gloves and masks do I need? Because if you were in healthcare at that time, you know, this was a challenge for everybody. And then I had to make the decision to say, okay, if I have this, then what do I need to do to change my operation so that I can function with this? If this is my worst case scenario. And it ended up being worst case scenario for many of us. So I hope that gives you some insight. If you want me to go into this more, which I think this is a very good topic actually, Chiz, I'm going to take a screenshot real quick because I would like to go into that a bit more. But that's how I make decisions in those very pressure situations. You just got to get data and you have to look at it from a factual standpoint. If I don't have this, this is going to happen. If I have this, this is going to happen. What's the best case? What's the worst case scenario? And how do you plan for both? I literally do that not only as a professional, I've done it as a C suite, I do that in my personal life as well. I've had a lot of things that I've dealt with where I've had to use those same skills as a C suite executive, as a director, to help me out personally when I have those very high stakes, high pressure situations going on. Okay, Fetch says, why would a person care about saving the world instead of focusing on themselves? Not selfishly, like achieving one's pleasures instead of helping others' pleasures, because all have a different life. Well, yes, everybody's different. And so does it necessarily mean that you're saving the world? It could be in the grand scheme of things, you may feel like, "Oh, I'm saving the world," but you don't necessarily have to. You still have to balance things out, and that's why when we're talking about it, that motto, that philosophy is very, very deeply personal to everyone. But when you think about people and saving the world and doing all that, it's just a matter of, if this is what you feel like you're called to do, then do it. Some people I know personally, their motto is to just take care of them and their family, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But then there's some people that may feel like, okay, well, I know I got to take care of my family, but there's something bigger that I'm called to do. And I will tell you that majority of the people that are a part of my audience here, they are very ambitious leaders like yourself, like Ches, like Tom, and there's a lot of things that they are going to do in their lives that will be absolutely amazing. And those are sometimes those individuals that no, there's just this tiny voice that says, you know, you're meant to do a bit more with your life. And it just really depends. Everybody's got different lives, Ches, in terms of what they want to do. No, you don't have to save the world, but if you feel as if what you have, I mean, Fish, if you have something that is impactful, that is meaningful, that is inspirational, that could potentially change how people function, how people operate, how people think, then why not give it out to the world? And why not change the world? So it's just something to think about. Hope that gives you some insight to consider there. Everybody's life is different. So we talked about a couple things so far. We talked about secrets to being an executive or speaking like an executive. And I just mentioned two. There's plenty other ones, but being more direct in terms of how you communicate and then absolutely being more concise in terms of how you are speaking will help you to definitely sound like an executive. If there's any other things or topics that you want to learn more about, just let me know. Okay, Chaz Man of Culture says, should I just make my research before making a decision, even if the data goes against my personal beliefs? It so if you have an example, let me know. But I would say try to get as much data as you can. If it is something that is contrary to your personal belief, if you're an executive role, okay, you're an executive role, Chaz, your personal beliefs about something are very, 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 very important. A lot of times that will help to dictate what you think is best. As long as you are approaching a situation in the way to where you are thinking about what is best for my team, what is best for the people I serve, what is best for the people I support, your personal beliefs will always be in the right place. If it is something, let's say, that's contrary to what you personally believe, but you know it's the right thing to do, then sometimes you have to go with what is the right thing for me to do. Because a lot of times it'll come back on you and it will be very hard when you have to reflect back and say, you know what, I knew that was the right thing to do. I don't know why I didn't do it. I let my personal beliefs get in the way. So if you have more specifics in terms of maybe a specific situation, that might be a bit helpful to get a bit more context. But I would just say go with the facts, go with the data, and think what's the best case, what's the worst case scenario, what is the best thing I can do to protect my team, protect my family, secure them and their safety and etc. But you have to have data to do that. I mean, sometimes you can go based off of feeling, oh, I feel like I'm just going to do this today. When you become that executive, you go transcend to that executive level, you think about things a lot differently. You're a bit more analytical. And as I mentioned, I use the way that I think not only when I was in those roles, but I do that personally. I have to gather data. I have to make phone calls. You know, if I have to call people and say, hey, what's going on? What's going on? I need information. So just keep that in mind. It may be if it's something against your personal beliefs, then let's see what exactly is that. As long as it's protecting your team, protecting your family, and etc. Your personal beliefs should always be in alignment with that. But just see what information you come up with. What is it? And if it's something that's going contrary to what you believe, then what's going to be the best outcome for your team? What's the best outcome for this? I've been in situations, Ches, where I've gotten the data and I put it together and I didn't like it. I didn't like it. I didn't like the data. I thought that, no, I don't believe that this is right. But in actuality, it really was. And I've had to make decisions that I didn't personally believe that I should have made, but they were the best decisions for my team. Okay, Fetch says not to be pessimist, but sometimes people are stubborn enough. Yes, they are stubborn, Fetch. That is right. Okay, sometimes people are stubborn enough to change their notion, even if you show them a much more useful way, which is pretty overwhelming for me to deal, even if I can share to the world. And I would say, let's see, let me read that one more time. People are stubborn enough to change their notion, even if you show them a much more useful way. Okay, so good point that you mentioned. You're gonna have stubborn people like that. There are stubborn people like that. And you almost have to think of it, and I say 10, I say Grant Cardone just because this is I'm reading his 10X book right now. But you have to think of it in a way to where, okay, you can show someone the right way and that this is going to be more useful and this is going to be better. But if they decide they don't want to do it, then you have to move on to somebody else. Just keep moving. There's someone that will say, you know what, Fetch, that was really smart and that was really intelligent. I love that. There are people out there that think what you are offering is amazing. Now, with anything, whether you're a business owner like myself, or you're growing a business or etc., it can be really hard when you're trying to say something and people are not receptive to it. But what I found is that there comes a bit of volume, so to speak. I mean, it depends on who you're talking to and who you are interacting with. Just because one person says, no, I don't want to do this, don't let that discourage you from sharing something that will be very useful. Many people find themselves in that rejection mode where you may have said something and someone says, "No, Fetch, I don't like it. I don't want to Fetch." And we pretty much internalize it to where we say, "Oh, well, in that case, I'm not going to do it anymore." And we completely just get the idea, put it on the shelf, and we just don't worry about it anymore. But I encourage you to just remember, just because one person said no, that doesn't mean everybody will. And when you have something you're sharing that's useful, many people may find it to be very beneficial and very helpful. So don't put your idea away. Just know that it may not be right for that person. So I hope that gives you something to think about. And that's not being a pessimist by any means, Fetch, at all. You're being a realist. You're saying exactly what happens because this happens every single day. Ches, Man of Culture says, it's a bit late, so I'll have to go, but I really appreciate your advice. Ches, of course, I'm here for you, friend. Just let me know what questions you have. Anything comes up for you, anything that comes up for you, any of my videos or shorts or anything like that, just send me a comment. I'm here to help you. Fetch says, same here. Thanks. Thanks for talking to me. Bye bye. Well, I hope you all have a wonderful night as well. I appreciate you being here and let me know how I can support you. Feel free to subscribe to the channel if you like this content. I go live just like this at least 7 times in a week during the week. If you have ever struggled with anything and you're navigating hard situations, some challenging processes like we've discussed today, I'm here to support you any way that I can. And I hope you all have an absolutely fantastic day. Bye for now.